and I hope that you'll make it personal to your clients. We're going to talk about some of our research studies, but before we do that, let me tell you that if you are not strength training, all right, then you are losing muscle at a very rapid rate. You're losing about 5 to 10 pounds of muscle every decade of adult life. It gets worse as you get older, but that's all right, we understand that. Secondly, the loss of muscle is responsible for a reduction in your resting metabolic rate of about an average of 3% every decade. That's not good. As Dr. Jamie just said, the resting metabolic rate goes down because of muscle, and fat goes up. It's a very positive relationship in the wrong direction. But there's another positive relationship that I hope you're not going to experience, and that is bone loss. Muscle loss, the loss of myoproteins in your muscle, is directly related to bone loss, the loss of osteo and collagen proteins in your bone. And that progresses at a very rapid rate if you're not doing some type of resistance exercise. That's about 10 to 30% per decade, depending upon your age. Now, why is that happening? Well, number one, you're not going to believe this because you are very active people. I know that for a fact. But really, when the CDC does research of how much exercise people do and how close they come to meeting the minimum requirements of about 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week of basically walking at a very reasonable walking pace, we find that fewer than 5% of all Americans come close to that. And that's just walking. How few do you think are doing any resistance exercise? No wonder we have so many healthcare issues. So strength training, aerobic exercise, extremely important to reduce the decline that otherwise occurs with aging. But there's a second reason, and that is this. As we age, our ability to process protein, to assimilate amino acids, decreases. So that an average person in their 50s processes only about half as much of the protein they consume as they did when they were in their 30s. For that reason, even if you're strength training, if you're over age 50, say, I want to build that muscle back, I want to build the bone back, which you can do. We'll show that in just a couple minutes. But if you're over 50 and you're eating simply the recommended daily allowance, the RDA for protein, you will not build more muscle. You need 25% more protein than the RDA just to maintain your muscle with the strength exercise. To build muscle, you need 50% more protein than the RDA. So the lack of protein is another key factor in these degenerative processes that face us as we're aging. I have, these actually are CAT scans that have been redrawn because the CAT scans are a little hard to see, of the thigh, cross-section of the thigh, of, on top, an average 25-year-old female. And the dark area would be the skin, the cream-colored area would be the subcutaneous fat, the fat that's between the skin and the muscle. The muscle, of course, would be the red section, your quadriceps, hamstrings, and abductor muscles that make up the thigh. And the white would be your bone, your femur bone, your thigh bone. So take a look at what happens to the average non-strength training, non-protein eating female who is now 30 years older at age 55, and that is on the bottom symbol. The slides aren't there? Oh, I'm sorry. My dear old mother, bless her soul, always said, there's no sense being stupid if you can't show it, so remember that. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay. So, does that make it a little more understandable? Okay, thank you. All right. This slide? Okay, so that slide, once again, is you have a cross-section of your thigh. And as a young adult, there's mostly muscle and some fat and a very thick femur bone, all right? As you age, the muscle decreases, the muscle gets smaller, it atrophies. We call it sarcopenia. And that leads always to the loss of bone. We call that, of course, osteopenia. But it also, because it reduces your metabolic rate, so if you're eating the same number of calories, more and more of those calories go into fat storage, And so, particularly in women who have most of their fat cells in their thigh, what happens is the fat layer, the fat section increases in size, that's the tan-colored area, as the muscle area, the red area, and the white area, the bone area, decrease in size. Okay, let me see if I've got this right. Nutrition plus exercise is better than exercise alone. All right? Okay. I was taught just the opposite when I went through all of my schooling, that if you ate mom's home cooking, you were just fine. But they didn't understand what I just explained to you about the inability to process proteins in the appropriate manner. So we did a series of studies. I'll give you the first one. This was to look at building back the muscle and the bone, and also to help with blood pressure, which is a pretty important consideration, right? So we did our standard exercise plan, same that we're going to use in all 4 of the studies I'm going to show you in the next few minutes. We do 20 minutes of resistance exercise, strength training. We do 20 minutes of endurance exercise, aerobic activity, of cycling on the stationary cycle or treadmill or those types of things. And we also make sure that people train at a reasonable number of days, 2 or 3 days a week. Remember, these are people, this study is with postmenopausal women, and they're not exercisers. This is new to them. We want to keep it relatively brief in duration, so 40 minutes, 2 or 3 days a week, relatively infrequent, so they have time to recover, and so they're not overwhelmed by the exercise protocol. What we did before they would leave the fitness research room where we did the exercises, my colleague Rita LaRosa Loud, who's one of your distributors who can't be here today because of some health issues, but she and I would make sure that they did a shake, a Shaklee shake, Shaklee 180 shake, before they left the room, and she was adamant about that. They couldn't leave until they drank their shake. And so what happened in a period of time, 9 months to be exact, we examined the changes between we call the control group that did no exercise, no shake, nothing, just did normal living. And as you can see on the left, they didn't fare too well. They lost more muscle, they lost more bone, 1%, which is actually a little less than we would have expected, but it was a good control group, I guess. And their blood pressure actually went up. I don't know what they did wrong, but they weren't doing things right. We had another group that did the exercise protocol only. And they actually increased muscle, which we knew they would do from numerous studies that we've conducted. They had sort of a little better, about the same blood pressure change in this particular group, but they didn't lose bone. They didn't gain bone, but they didn't lose. And so the radiologist who did all the DEXA scans said, you should be really pleased with that. They didn't lose. Otherwise, they would have lost bone. But the group that did the post-exercise shake, they not only gained more muscle, which is good news, they not only reduced their resting systolic, the S stands for systolic blood pressure, and their resting diastolic, the D stands for diastolic blood pressure, by 10 millimeters of mercury systolic and almost 5 diastolic. And that was not measured by hand. That was blood pressure units from Mass General Hospital's operating room, so there was no human error in that. But look at the bone difference. Instead of losing 1%, they added 1%. This is a time. This is at a time when doctors were telling my wife, among everybody else, that there's nothing you can do to reverse bone loss. And there is. Proper exercise and enough protein will certainly do that. We also use the vitalizer strip to help with vitamin D and calcium, by the way, in this study, which was certainly a plus as well. Now, talking about the weight loss that Dr. Jamie introduced, we said if we can add muscle and add bone, how about if this would enhance fat loss with a standard weight loss program? And our standard weight loss program involves always 20 minutes of strength, 20 minutes of endurance, 2 or 3 days a week, very simple, very manageable. And we always use the Harvard Medical School guidelines, Dr. Caroline Apovian's guidelines for our studies in terms of diet. Men do about 15 to 1,800 calories per day. Women do about 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day. So it's not restrictive, it's not deprivational, they can handle it. Okay, and we just take it slow and study and hope that we win the race. So what we did in this study, we had them, again, right after the workout, which is the best time to assimilate proteins into the muscles, into the bones, from the blood. we had them take a shake, just like we did before. And sure enough, we get this next slide on. Sure enough, they got the right slide? Okay. All right. This slide, I'm sorry, I got two slides in front of me. I was getting confused on this stuff. I'm going to just stand right in front of this one. I'm from New England. It's not Las Vegas, boy. So this is but in this particular, you're so kind. In this particular study, it was a 6-month study, a good time frame. The people did exercise only. They lost quite a bit of fat. They did well. They gained muscle. That did good. The body composition, the muscle loss combined with the muscle gain by the fat loss was really good, about 8 pounds. But the group that took the post-exercise shake did so much better. Again, just like in the previous study, they built more muscle. They lost almost twice as much fat. And so their total body composition change was over 14 pounds. That was amazing. They were very impressed. I was very impressed. Here's what they said. They said, we don't want to take this shake. We're trying to lose weight, and the shake has calories. Rita said, take it and shut up. And they did. They did the shakes. They had a great time taking the shakes. And you know what? The shake was simple to do, and it was satiating, and it was satisfying. They didn't stop at Dunkin' Donuts, that's a New England chain, or Starbucks, and get stuff that might not have been so good. They felt really good about that, and they liked taking the shake, and they lost, as I said, about twice as much weight. So let me get to my last couple slides here. We then said, okay, if it works well with a post-exercise shake, how about if we, with the same nutrition guidelines, the same exercise program, do 2 meal replacement shakes? So they make sure they're getting their protein, at least 20 grams at a time, which is what seniors need in order to process the protein, at least 20 grams. And also that they would make sure that they're staying within the boundaries of their diet program. So we did that. They did 2 life shakes, typically for breakfast and for lunch. And what happened was this. After 6 months, they lost 14 pounds of fat, 50% more than when they just took it as a post-exercise shake. They didn't gain quite as much muscle because you can't burn the calorie at both ends successfully, but they still gained muscle. It's one of the very few studies that ever showed, the first one and this one, that ever showed concurrent increases in muscle and decreases in fat. That has not happened very often. As Dr. Jamie said, most diet programs can have 30 or even 40% of the weight loss as muscle, which is counterproductive because it just reduces your metabolic rate so far that you can't keep that weight off. And about 95% of all individuals who lose weight on a diet plan regain that weight within the first year after the plan. So they gained muscle about 4 pounds, I'm going to round that up. They lost fat about 14 pounds, and that meant they had an actual change in their body composition, their physical ability, their physical capacity, their physical appearance by about 18 pounds, almost double what they lost on the scale. So don't just go by the scale. Go by the measurements, and we do, of course, body compositions, or how they look and feel and function is more important. Now, my last slide is my second to last is the most important one. All right? Let's see why that didn't come up. There we go. All right? My second one of the studies is the more important one. This was one of a kind. This has never been found before in any research study that I have ever seen. We see a lot of research studies. Every diet program works for losing weight. Unfortunately, a lot of that weight can be muscle, and so they don't work for maintaining the weight. So many of the people that have come to us to be in our research studies have been on 4, 6, 8, even 10 diet programs, and they've regained the weight back. So we said, look, what could happen during a 6-month period after they stop the diet and go back to normal eating? Because very few studies have shown that people can maintain their weight. We said, go back to your normal eating, no more calorie restriction, but would you please continue your exercise program? twice a week, 20 minutes of strength, 20 minutes of endurance. They all said, yes, we love the exercise program. We said, could you still possibly do just one protein shake, one meal replacement shake a day? They all said, yes, we love the shake. And so that's what we did. We stopped the diet, but we continued the exercise program and one life shake. And this has not been attained before. There's been a few studies that have maintained body weight. They've had a lot of psychological counseling and a lot of other things. We did none of that. We just simply kept them on the exercise program and the one meal replacement shake. And in fact, after another 6 months, they continued to gain muscle at almost the same rate, rebuilding that muscle that they lost during the aging process over the decades. That's good. They continue to lose fat, not a lot, but they continue to lose fat, and they had no significant increase in their body weight. So the fact that we could not only, after a whole year of doing either 2 or 1 life shake meal replacements and doing a basic exercise program, we could continue that and see concurrent muscle gain and fat loss for a period of over 1 year, with a significant weight loss as well. And that didn't even mention the changes in blood pressure and reduction in HbA1c, blood sugar. It was just a phenomenal study. We thank you so much, Shaklee, for sponsoring us. But those were great results. I want to end with this slide. There's a stimulus needed to rebuild or to build muscle and bone and to recharge your metabolic rate, your metabolism, your resting metabolism. And that is some type of resistance exercise. Aerobic exercise is wonderful. We always include it in all of our studies. But I will tell you this, if we didn't have the resistance training, you would lose more fat with diet and aerobic exercise, but you would also lose more muscle. Again, you can't really count on both ends. So the strength training has to be a part of that. It is the stimulus to rebuild the muscle, the bone, and recharge your metabolic rate. But in addition to the stimulus, you need some substance. You need some muscle building material, and that is protein. And the best protein that we have found is the Shaklee products. We've used them in all our studies. I have one last thing to say, and that is this. We just finished a new study, a 6-month study, where we didn't use a Shaklee product, okay? I know, I'm sorry. We didn't use any product. We said, okay, can you, with the help of a nutritionist, we had nutrition lectures every other week, and you can meet with the nutritionist, we said, can you just get the protein, the extra protein that you need from your daily foods? And they said, sure, we can do that. They couldn't. We didn't analyze the data yet, but I'll tell you what's really important. The most important thing is compliance. In the 4 studies I showed you, we had over an 85% completion rate. That is very rare in diet programs. Usually it's about a 50% completion rate, all right? When we didn't give them the shake, they still did the same strength training and endurance exercise, but we didn't give them the shake. What happened was this. This is what I was able to look at before I came. I don't have the slide out, but I'll tell you this as a fact. We had only a 60% completion rate. I'd much rather have an 85% completion rate, wouldn't you? And I'll conclude with this. I think that just take, that's what I do. I used to eat these big breakfasts, now I do a Shaklee shake. It's simple. It is simple. It is, as I said, satiating. You feel good, you don't feel hungry after it. And it is very satisfying knowing that you're getting the protein you need, not just at 1 meal a day or after your workout, but throughout the day as you take that, you get your 20 grams or more of protein. Simple, satiating, satisfying. It just lends itself to success in the type of things we're trying to do to change people's behavior, which would be, get the weight down, replace the muscle, rebuild the bone, and recharge the metabolism, and have a healthier lifestyle. Thank you so very much.